Whenever someone says the 2000s were one of the worst time periods in animation history, I always need a minute to process what they mean. Then I remember the second half of the decade, and Cartoon Network during the second half of the decade. You're not going to hear it from me how live action gripped the home of animation, or how the animated offerings of the time were so much worse than their golden age of the late 90s and early 2000s. Seriously, the early run wasn't spotless, and this weird transitional puberty state for Cartoon Network originals had plenty of shows that deserved to be seen as classics. One of them being Camp Lazlo. What we have here is quite a unique beast for Cartoon Network. In terms of look and feel, it wasn't much different from a 90s Nicktoon, which is fine. It was a home for all walks of cartoon life. And its setting was that of a summer camp adjacent to the wilderness. Not a bad choice for a breezy, relaxing aesthetic, at a time where other CN originals certainly had energy and creativity, but dear lord, they could not zip it.
Destroy us all! 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 Destroy us all!
I'm a toe picker. Toe picker. I'm a toe picker. I'm a hot toe picker. Pick my toe, it's hot.
Camp Lazlo definitely had some things going for it, so why isn't it as well remembered as most of the others? And moreover, why should it? It was created by a guy named Joe Murray, who you might know from when I covered Rocko's Modern Life way back when. When Rocko ended in 1996, Murray stepped away from animation and started writing children's books and raising kids, but he never stopped brainstorming new projects. Specifically, he kept a notebook of cartoon doodles, never locking a good idea away in his head. Then one day around 2004, he thought a summer camp could be a great setting for a full cartoon, and a spider monkey would be a fun fit for main character. He would take it to Cartoon Network Studios this time, and although they liked it, some modifications had to be made. For one thing, the camp was originally called Camp Runny Rump, but was changed to Camp Kidney, and all the Bean Scout dorms were themed after beans. Furthermore, the adult tone found in Rocko was toned down drastically, even though most of the team from that show and SpongeBob was reassembled. This was a conscious decision on Murray's behalf too, wanting to make a show that could entertain his daughters. Some jokes even got on because they made them laugh. Lastly, although a rougher build of Gone Fishin' sort of was created as the pilot, it wasn't meant to be the first episode. Parasitic Pal was. But Cartoon Network pushed it back to episode 4 because they didn't want kids to remember Lazlo as the character with a leech stuck to his face. Camp Lazlo premiered on July 8, 2005 and garnered a positive reception and moderately sized audience. It was never a network headliner like the Powerpuff Girls or Ed, Edd n Eddy, but most people felt it was fine enough children's entertainment. But bad luck would soon strike Joe Murray again. He went through a divorce at some point during production on the second or third season, and then in 2007 publicly refused to appear in commercials for Camp Lazlo McDonald's Happy Meals. I really don't know what they were thinking when they asked world-renowned Choky chicken satirist to endorse Happy Meal toys, but I don't know. It's speculated that this turmoil is what got the show cancelled later in the year. I mean, the 5th season is suspiciously short compared to the first 4, but this has not been confirmed by either party. Camp Lazlo ended on March 27, 2008, but through all the hardships, Murray stayed in the post-production office until the very last day of work, and sadly, it wasn't around long enough to leave an impact. I mean, come on, Brotown outlasted it. Although there are currently no plans to bring it back, some references to it were snuck into the Rocko's Modern Life revival movie, Static Cling, but contrasted with its older brother, retrospective analysis of Lazlo over the past 13 years has typically just consisted of the 5th and 8th letters of the alphabet. I won't get into a major argument over that. I don't think Lazlo's as great as Rocko for a number of reasons, but it does deserve more attention than it currently gets.
Let's see what wisdom it holds.
Beautiful.
Welcome to Camp Kidney, a smelly, rundown summer camp that will be your home for the next 3 years. Activities include swimming in Leaky Lake, feuding with Acorn Flats, and telling campfire stories with your fellow anthropomorphic animal buddies. Sounds like a good deal to Lazlo, a peace-loving Brazilian spider monkey, and his new best friends, Raj the Indian elephant and Clam the albino rhino. And although mayhem unfolds wherever they go in the camp and beyond, to the annoyance of Scoutmaster Limpus, Lazlo always sees an opportunity to get the most out of the Bean Scout experience. There's also this girl camp across the river because Joe Murray has daughters and Cartoon Network likes its shows to be gender neutral, yada yada, not as liked, I'll get to them eventually. The best thing the show does with its premise is make sure every new hobby or activity can be made into an adventure. While not usually as surreal as Rocko, the spirit and personalities of the characters tend to elevate the stories to being very entertaining. A lot of them were cartoon archetypes who were starting to get all too familiar by this point. Still, plenty of these people were alumni of some of the greatest shows of all time, period. So their work still having this much spunk and imagination this long after they entered the field is pretty awesome. But with that cast, it could have been stronger. Lazlo is energetic, free-spirited, and social, but doesn't always know when he's annoying others. While that's fine in a vacuum, they wrote him way too similarly to SpongeBob. A lot of Cartoon Network characters at the time seemed to take one aspect of SpongeBob and make a whole character out of it. And while Lazlo is far from the worst of these, he's the most blatant as a copycat. There's no way he wouldn't behave like SpongeBob in any given situation. Again, decent character in a vacuum, but he doesn't have his own unique identity as a main character. His best friend Raj is an elephant who's more down to earth and fearful of nature, but will stick by Lazlo most of the time. He's a familiar best friend archetype, but he works when you get over the fact that he's voiced by Johnny Bravo. The other Kevin mate is Clam, a rhino who usually only speaks one word at a time, but is friendly, loyal, and more talented than you're led to believe. Alone, Lazlo isn't anything special, but with the rest of Jelly Cabin, he's more in his natural habitat. These three manage to cause mischief in 3 different ways at a time, so I never got the sense that any of them were useless as characters. Other campers include Edward, a grouchy platypus who thinks everyone around him is an idiot. I mean, he's not wrong, but still, he makes a good foil for the more upbeat characters. Samson's a shy guinea pig who likes things to be clean and normal, so you can imagine he's not having the best possible time at Camp Kidney. There's potential with him that they gradually unlocked as the show went on, and that's good to see. You also get Chip and Skip, 2 really tall dung beetles who are dumb and gross. Try as I might, I could not be entertained by them too many times. They seem nice and active enough, but they're just the dumb gross characters there for comic relief. Not that you really need comic relief in a comedy cartoon. There are some background characters too that they dredge up later in the show like Dave, Ping Pong, Harold, and the lemmings Disney didn't kill. They weren't as heavy of hitters, but they could make the camp feel bigger than it was. Scoutmaster Lumpus is a cranky old moose looking for a better job than taking care of kids at a camp. He's rude, commanding, and inadequate, but he has some good bits here and there. He's a character that's at the top of his game in the early run, so savor what you can with him. His assistant Slinkman is his straight man, but more than that, he has his own chemistries and aspirations. He's far and away the best character on the show, and oddly enough, Tom Kenny's favourite role he's ever done, and that's saying something. The only other adults are Nurse Leslie, a shark of a nurse who's seen better days, and Chef McMuesli, a vegan goat who always gets the kids to eat healthy, unnutritious food. I don't know if 4 adults is too few for a summer camp, but they tend to all stick out, though generally through their job titles. Let's move on over to Acorn Flats, where girl power reigns supreme and clickers get a workout. I've seen some pretty mixed reactions to this camp and its residents, but in the spirit of fairness, they needed something feminine to bounce out this sausage fest, so there is a functional use to its inclusion. The girls who reside there, well, Patsy the mongoose, or Rocko in a dress, is the Squirrel Scout given debatably the most screen time and most important role, having a crush on Lazlo. That's the only thing she really has going for her, and after that's put out of focus, she turns into a very disappointing waste of space. The giraffe and alligator fare a little better. Nina's more of a science fiction geek, and Gretchen's more tough and hostile toward the boys. They're really not much more complicated than that, but Nina tends to be the most pleasant to watch. There's also a 4th ranger, Almondine, a shy girl who more or less is treated like a gender-swapped Samson, and you know what, she's kind of decent and used sparingly but well. The scout mistress here is Jane Doe, a much more friendly and competent public servant, whom Olympus has the hots for. It doesn't work out for them. I really like Miss Doe, but holy hell is her love quest one of the bleakest arcs in the series. That's another thing I'll get to eventually, so just hold on to her happy memories for her, please. The only other recurring adult in Acorn Flats is Miss Mucus, a warthog and loud competitive coach who isn't the best or worst character or anything, but is more of an adversary most of the time. 2 more to go now. Commander Hoo-Ha is Camp Kidney's superintendent of sorts, a drill sergeant always breathing down Olympus's neck. When used well, he can be a great foil to the guy, and even provide a threat to the camp at large. And last of all, my least favorite character, Mayor McPucker, the repulsive, brain-dead mayor of Brickley Pines. And yes, he looks about as good as he sounds and acts. Why they tried to make him this gross is beyond me, but he's a memorable character, still haunting my peripheral vision. So even though there are more than a couple characters that were flash or left in the dust, why do I still consider Camp Lazlo an entertaining show? Are the good characters just that good? Well, sort of.
A living, breathing example of universal consciousness. Oh well. Let's chop it down!
No matter who I was following, I always felt like the stories being told were funny and interesting. Comedy is such a hard thing to describe since not everyone has the same sense of humor, and explaining some jokes can devalue them, but I think what works about it here is the general atmosphere of the setting. Camp to a kid is a wide open world ready for adventure and exploring, but to an adult, it's hot, tiresome, and you just want to sit back and relax in the heat. Camp Lazlo may be loud, but it always has an inner adult making sure things don't get too wacky to believe, and when they do, the characters must be able to carry them forward. The look of the show really helps out this surprisingly balanced atmosphere. If you like the color yellow, then this show will give you the color yellow. The color palette is very warm, even going for greens at nighttime, but it's always vibrant and eye-catching. This was one of the first Cartoon Network originals to be made in high definition, but it was clearly made with a standard definition viewing experience in mind. Not that that's a bad thing, HDTVs had yet to dominate the market, and there weren't a whole lot of instances where a shot doesn't look good in one aspect ratio or another. Now, although it wasn't on TV for a very long time, there's still 5 seasons to get through. They're short, clocking in at 13 half hours max, so don't get ready for a lot of different seasonal trends.
Do you need our help? 'Cause you asked us not to help.
Don't worry about me. What makes you think I need your...
Okay.
Season 1 is very chill and simple at points, but is more than ready to show you something wacky to show it can do that well too. People who've watched only this season will tell you that they felt like the show was too similar to SpongeBob in style, and that's because a lot of the ideas from that show were unabashedly recycled. I feel like I've already seen a girl trying to hunt down a legless animal to prove her strength, a guy playing in a box and treating it like a breeding ground for imagination, and a guy forming a bond with a 4-legged animal despite the mess it causes. If you're a classic SpongeBob purist and are dying for a 4th or 5th classic-style season now, I bet early Camp Lazlo could hit the spot, but I doubt you're getting anything innovative from it.
Driver, are you sure this is a safe thing to do?
Of course not, Raj. That's why we're doing it.
Oh, right. Okay.
The 2nd, 3rd, and 4th seasons are all about the same in terms of their tone, comedy, and storytelling, so I can't really pick one to be my favorite. 3 maybe, being the tip of the bell curve. What these seasons have in common is that they like to branch out to more characters than just the 5 main ones. Spotlights are common, which makes some of the weirder or less appealing characters more forgivable, as you can tell they want to test the waters with them. Edwin and Samson slowly became breakout stars, getting their own backstories and such, to the point that they could honestly make for better main characters than Lazlo if Joe could turn back the clock. Lumpus and Slinkman's banter got funnier around this time, but Lumpus on his own was less reliable as a good character. He's not particularly charming, and you can tell that more as the show progresses. Acorn Flats also loses some focus in Season 4, frankly to the show's detriment. Many of its inhabitants were given less to say and do, ironically as Camp Kidney's background characters were made more visible, but I'm not too disappointed by that. They had some fun moments, but weren't the bread and butter of the show. They also started making some specials around this time, namely a big adventure where we learn more about how this world's camping system functions, and a TV movie, Where's Lazlo, where we learn how he, Raj, and Clam first met. Also, the season 4 premiere was part of Cartoon Network Invaded, if you still have your memories of that. It's clear that even though the show's intended to be a silly romp, that they will sometimes give you something grander and more meaningful to keep you invested. Don't ask me what 7 Deadly Sandwiches was about though.
Double or nothing, double or nothing.
The 5th, final, seemingly cut short season is where it hits the fan. There's a lot more experimentation here, screwing around with plot structures and character dynamics, sometimes to the point of self-parody. While I think there was some good to come out of this, it was mostly just in appreciating the first 4 seasons more. I did not like this new direction for a long list of reasons. Really shoving it in our faces that Edward's family is mean to him is one thing, but kind of expected. The big one is we're introduced to a love triangle between Lumpus, Miss Doe, and Mayor McPucker, and elderly Filbert, which is just horribly cliche, painfully unfunny, and really damn sad on Miss Doe's behalf. They make jokes about how desperate and lonely she is, and I can't laugh, that sucks, even if she is a cartoon character. Not helping is that Lumpus really went off the rails this season, becoming a whole new level of immature. When it's to the point where I don't know if he can run a camp anymore, then that's a problem. And the stories are certainly more conceptual, which can lead to deeper ideas being explored, but other times it felt like they just wanted to get some ideas over with. It really reaches its zenith in the finale, Lumpus's Last Stand. After creating a fashion trend of just covering yourself in paint, and it ending when rain hits, a police car comes around and we see Heifer from Rocko's Modern Life come out and announce that he was the real Scoutmaster all along, and Lumpus was an imposter. They pulled an Armin Tamzarian at the last possible moment. That's weird for just the fact we're seeing a Nicktoon character on Cartoon Network. Not to mention Heifer should still be stuck in outer space around this time. It's a weird ending, certainly an entertaining idea if I had to pin merit to it, but it's a very odd send-off the more you think about it. I think that's the best way to describe Camp Lazlo. Odd, but largely well made and funny. Lazlo's first crush sees our little monkey boy growing up, preparing for a date with a mermaid that he hears in Leaky Lake one day. It's fun and sweet, but my only empty feeling is that they could have gotten Patsy involved in some way. I mean, you've got Jodie Benson voicing her, the joke writes itself. Ed's Benedict is one of the weirder ideas. Edward thinks he's expecting. It highlights what works about his character. He is grumpy, but young and needing of a light in his life, even if it's just an egg that certainly won't hatch into a platypus. No beads, no business is the cold dig at capitalism that we were all waiting for from Camp Lazlo, with Raj quickly taking his job at the supply stand too seriously. From my experience, no one ever came to camp with their own money, so making the currency beads was well observed. Squirrel Scout Slinkman goes and highlights all the ways Slinkman isn't like Lumpus, and how things would be terrible if he was. But he doesn't take it out on the Bean Scouts, rather the Squirrel Scouts, who were kind of asking for it after he becomes their substitute Scoutmaster. Racing Slicks, above all else, is really sweet. This was Slinkman's breakout episode, and it showed that although he can be Lumpus's lapdog, he's more than capable of carrying a story and mingling with the campers without any issue. Tour Wars is a good little romp about competing boat tours around Leaky Lake, and Lazlo ruining both through shenanigans. But at least they're funny shenanigans, and we see the difference between how Lazlo and Edward would do things. The Nothing Club, at face value, is a carbon copy of the SpongeBob episode Idiot Box, which already shared similarities with the paper, but at least it's a really funny one that brings together lots of characters and further fuels Edward's rivalry with Lazlo. In the Book of Slinkman, there's been a super wacky mix-up between the new Camp Kidney and Acorn Flats guidebooks, so the boys start acting more girly and kind of enjoy it. I know this plot can hit differently these days, but it does teach them to dial down the masculinity, then hate themselves. I never knew there was so much sexism in the camping industry. The Tusk Wizard is this world's Indian interpretation of the Tooth Fairy, with Raj desperate to see him after one of his tusks fall out. Lazlo and Clam help him out. Twice. I'm hoping this episode entertained kids, as well as teach them to take the tooth fairy with a grain of salt. The Tusk Wizard is real though. Burpless Bean may be rather impolite in subject matter, but it's really special. We get to see Edward act genuinely friendly to Lazlo in order to get him to burp for his dream choir, and an amazing moral that you don't need to burp to entertain people. How is this not more well known? Taking care of Gretchen is one of the heavier ones. Lazlo needs Samson to give Gretchen what's coming to her, but it's still played for laughs. And the more intense it gets, going as far as to parody The Godfather, the more absurd too. It's also got the best credit sequence in the show. Hello Beanies is odd in that the kids aren't back in school by the end of October, but it still makes for a really speedy, hilarious Halloween episode where Jellycabin mistakenly spooks Lumpus all night, who believes the Halloween spirit is out to get him. Best Halloween ever for them, and in all honesty, it's one of my new favourites too. Now, Hello Summer, Goodbye Camp is how you do a special. If you want a song number, you get a song number. If you want a threat to the status quo, you get a threat to the status quo. If you want this photoatomic transson gobulating yectofan triplutonic Zan ziptomizer acting likeable, you'll get that. It also has bean lore if you're into that sort of thing. The tale of Pimpleback Mountain gives us some insight into the Lumpus family lineage. They were always failures, but with a wild tale that shows Lumpus at his very best. Making him this giddy and proud of what is basically a warped Shaggy Dog story was the best way to get an enthusiastic spirit out of him and give Jellycabin something really strange to bounce off of. Camp Dinky would have to be my favourite episode of all, however. Because the campers notice a misspelled Camp Kidney sign, they believe it's for a new camp that'll make all their dreams come true, and they imagine the best possible camps for themselves. It went to show how pretty much every Bean Scout could stand on their own by this point in the show, and gave several paradise camp ideas. Kids are always told by media to imagine their dream house or dream school, so this one hits some sought after notes. However, if you want to see what my fuss is about, these 10 episodes are probably some of the last ones you'll want to start with. Lumpus versus the volcano sees the Bean Scouts doing this weird sacrifice where they have to throw something they like into a volcano because yada yada, this doesn't happen in real life, and Lumpus absolutely refuses to give up his prized chicken pot pie. He knows he can just buy another one, right? The Great Snipe Hunt is my favourite type of episode, the wacky misunderstanding genre. Lumpus gets all the characters to hunt for a snipe, but becomes a snipe by accident, and the campers should be able to tell it's him and should be able to handle it properly, but they can't because comedy. Brickley Pining Dining has a neat idea, the camp going into town for food, but I didn't find the execution of it all too thrilling. Beef Lumberjacks is not a right location for super fun times, and the scenes with Lazlo and the gang goofing off in the bathroom were probably just added for an attempt at levity, and it did not hit the spot. Lazlo Loves a Parade is not an episode I love. Mayor McPucker has his grand debut here, and putting aside that, I didn't think the parade float battle between the two camps was realized to its funniest potential. Loogie Llama was an attempt at a lovely bonding story between a monkey and his llama, which is bogged down dramatically by endless flatulent noises. Seriously, get this thing a vet. And the Squirrel Scouts not knowing the difference between a unicorn and a llama with an ice cream on its forehead. Get them some vets too. I was planning on doing a showdown between this and My Pretty Seahorse from SpongeBob, but Samson Needs a Hug would be lame enough if it was just the worst case of Lazlo being a clueless idiot to some damage he's causing, but making it about non-consensual hugging makes it a much tougher episode to watch today. I know he's a kid and it's sort of telling them that hugging without permission is wrong, but it went overboard in making him look like someone who wouldn't learn that lesson. The engagement is the beginning of the end of the Lumpus Doe McPucker triangle. Too bad it's the start as well. Lumpus trying desperately to ruin her last bastion of happiness and getting the Bean Scouts in on it is just way too cruel-hearted for a plot of this show. At least the episode where they somehow get married later on is spending its time throwing its hand up in the air and repels any seriousness. But this prequel of sorts doesn't have that. Hold It Lazlo is an episode that the internet was made for. That's about the nicest thing I can say about it. We have a ton of really painful pee jokes in a sequence, And then this whole thing with nappies. Putting aside the hindsight that parts of the web make this story a lot more disturbing, I didn't find it funny when I was a young innocent lad either. 7 Deadly Sandwiches was their second attempt at the half-hour format, and it was a complete bomb for me. It doesn't have enough good jokes to warrant a shorter episode, let alone this. There is something here about how lame summer camp productions are, but it's not conveyed in an entertaining manner. My least favorite episode is S is for Crazy, where Samson gets a jellyfish stuck to his head, goes insane, and so Lumpus goes around taking advantage of the poor kid. That's just way too scummy for me to take him with any grain of salt, and the twist ending here was such a half-assed last-minute addition. That's a fair bit of rubbish, but to be fair, a lot of my complaints with these 10 episodes is that I didn't laugh a whole lot with them. But comedy is subjective, so if you find potential in those stories, I won't stop you from checking them out and potentially enjoying them. That's the thing with Camp Lazlo, it's full of surprises. They may not be very satirical or mature here, but Joe Murray Productions still had it. A sense of humor, a sense of adventure, and a sense of wonder could be found throughout the entire show, which I think holds it together and makes it enjoyable as a kids show. If you're an adult and missed the boat on it, then you probably shouldn't expect a world from it, but if you're younger, I'm sure it could weave some magic and make you feel like you're outside again. Goodbye for now.
And now, back to Disney Channel's original series, Kim Possible.
Go back! I want to be Monkey!